So, Zach, you are a special guest, Zach Bolen from Citizens on Fresh today, and calling us from Washington. Is that correct?
Well, that would have been true about a year ago, but my family and I, we moved to Tennessee. So,
Oh, congratulations!
yeah,
That's
we lived in
exciting.
Washington we lived there for 10 years, and that's where the band started, and we hung out a lot there. And then we wanted to get closer to family, and being in Nashville or near Nashville, and more of a music town. So it's been a lot of good things there.
I'm sure you've made a lot of great connections, and I know the Christian scene has always been quite big in Nashville as well, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think too, even now, there's just more independent bands than ever. I mean, we're not independent, but we were for a period of time. So I feel like you get to meet a lot of people that are coming through town, even if they don't live here, that are coming in and want to do some writing or just connect. And that's been pretty cool.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just realized you guys have maybe been around for a bit longer, but in terms of releasing music, this is your 10th year of releasing music. Is that right?
That's right. It's crazy.
Congratulations. You guys have been around for a decade.
I
That's
know.
massive for any band.
Oh, it is massive. I mean, we talk about that a lot so many bands don't even make it to their second record, and we've made it now to 6. So that just feels unbelievable. And I mean, it's interesting because we couldn't do it unless we had people that supported it and believed in it, and we had fans of people that followed it. So that's been pretty humbling to know that throughout the world there's people that are keeping this thing going.
Speaking of which, I know you have a big fan base here in Australia, but it seems like, especially in Sydney, you're quite well loved. Is that right?
Yes, Sydney is for sure our whenever we go there, it's never a bad time. So
Mm.
we've
I
always
love
just had
that.
a blast there, and we want to get back hopefully at the beginning of 2023. That's the hope.
That would be incredible. And I assume you'd be touring this record, which is coming later this year. Is that right? So you're releasing
Yep.
an EP in July, and then a new album later this year.
Yep, that's right.
Can you reveal anything about it in terms of either the title or the theme, perhaps? Or
Yeah,
tell us
so
a bit more about the record.
the EP that's coming out is going to be called 1,000 Shores, which is there'll be 5 songs on that, and that's sort of like the first iteration of this whole journey. I mean, a lot of the record, the first song that I wrote actually for it was a song called Everything and More, and that song really sort of, I think, set the stage for all the other songs that would come, and that was about 2 years ago. And really just kind of the big idea being that we can't possibly find the edges of God, that God is edgeless and boundless and uncontainable. And it's a record about making peace with that, rather than finding that separation. You could camp out there and say, well, that just means God is just so distant and nowhere to be found. But that's the sort of I guess you could call it the paradox of it all, is that there is this grandness and bigness to who God is, and yet a nearness to that makes God someone that we can know. And these little ways, every year of our life, we kind of get a bigger picture. And that's sort of what this record is getting into.
Can I ask how first of all, I guess how you arrived at that, and how your perspective of God changed or evolved throughout this recording process?
Yeah. Well, I think really what got me to this place was recognizing at least here in the States, the past, I would say 5-6 years and plus, but especially the past 5 or 6 years have been pretty tenuous, and specifically a lot of conflating of scripture with politics, and the church with certain moral issues, and it's become so muddy that if you disagree on this one issue, then we can't walk together. And so there's these big divisions that happen, and naturally it makes either side angry. It makes the side that's been pushed out angry and feel like they don't belong, and then it makes the other side that pushed the people out angry because they see these people that just have one thing maybe that they're different in. They see them as an enemy. And I just started personally, even in my own life, recognizing that trying to get people to come together to agree on something it isn't, I'm not saying it isn't a noble task, but it's nearly impossible. And I just thought, man, isn't that interesting? We'll come together to try and agree on this one thing. And even let's just say we do, there's still probably 20 other things that we don't. And so is that really going to be the basis of relationship? Is just about always drawing our lines in the sand? Like it can't be that. And
Mm.
I really started to think about what's big enough to sort of take us out of the weeds and stop focusing on the details and see the bigger picture. And I mean, as simple as it sounds, I think it's God. And I think we, um, I don't know. I think sometimes I don't know. I think about it in terms of eternity and just the fact that there will be a point when we're all together. And I just don't think we're probably going to be arguing.
I hope
And
not.
so,
No, I
yeah,
don't think so.
right. And I don't think so. And so I wonder if maybe we we starve ourselves, and I think it sounds dramatic, but we starve ourselves emotionally and relationally by building these walls. Not
Mm,
only walls that keep us from having relationship with people, but also that are different than us or think different or have just one slightly different point of view. But we also inevitably build these walls around God because we say, well, God must be this, and God fits inside this box. And really what I started to discover is the boxes and the walls that I keep trying to contain God in, God just keeps expanding those. And so that's
mm.
really what I think began this whole journey for me and the band and everybody that wrote on it. The process of just kind of wanting to say that and wanting that to be um, just feeling like it's an important conversation. And I think music is probably one of the most effective ways of being able to open a door to some deeper conversation.
Definitely. And what you've just said there reminds me of another band. Everyone knows this band, Switchfoot. I don't know if you heard their most recent record, Interrobang, from
Yeah.
last year, but I had the opportunity to speak with one of the guys, and he mentioned that the origins for that record was uh, also similar tensions in their personal life, people, disagreements between people and what they were seeing on a larger scale politically and
Yeah.
in Christianity and things like that. But they actually it actually culminated in them. I don't know how they came across, but they worked with a producer called Tony Berg, who's worked with people like Paul
Mhm.
McCartney and Phoebe Bridgers, and he's an atheist, and so they actually both clashed. The band and him clashed over several things in terms of their views and how they saw the world and things, certain issues, but they came out of the other end as friends, and a lot of the songs and the themes on the record are about that tension and disagreements and finding common ground and anyway, it's a really interesting conversation, but um, and yeah, it's just interesting how it seems like the last few years, not just in America, but I'd say around the world, for a variety of issues,
Mhm.
people have been a lot more polarized. But I think people have also had to confront obviously what they believe and why they believe certain things, but trying to, I think it can either push you to find common ground and to make that peace, as you say, or to fight back and to become really fearful or
Right.
antagonistic, or so anyway, I just think that that's interesting, that I think there's it's not just one thing, it's not just the pandemic, but I think there are a variety of things that have for one reason or another, I think, forced culture at large
Yeah.
to confront that. But obviously, um, God is not always a part of that picture. But of course, in terms of citizens and Christianity, I think yeah, I think you guys have always had a lot to say in your music. And in this new album, I mean, so far the singles that have come up are quite effervescent sonically and full of wonder. But
Mhm.
um, I understand that much of the project, including the song Imagination, came from a much darker, more painful place. Could you
Yeah.
talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, really, it it was a lot of things happening, but one of the things was just, uh, a good a friend of mine, or that we had a disagreement, and a lot of it was not necessarily anything that we had talked about. They had just made a lot of assumptions based on maybe something I said or even my wife had said, and rather than talking about it or asking questions, just sort of assume these things about us, and ev- eventually drew the conclusion that we just shouldn't talk anymore. And that was pretty devastating. And unfortunately, we never got the chance to really talk to them again, because a few months later they wound up dying from COVID complications, and or
Oh no.
their death was due to COVID complications. And I, I, I think that as I was writing this song, I was imagining, uh, I was imagining just something different, other than, again, trying to come together on this thing, and just me feeling really misunderstood, and seeing the anger that they carried with them, and just how sad that was, and just wanting to write a song that could sort of be a protest song against all that anger and against all that division, but is also a song about just, I don't know, knowing that there is a day coming when all things will be made new, and it's hard to sometimes wait for that. And so
Mm.
I just wanted to have a song that was not necessarily, it's not really like a desperation song, but it kind of is. But it's also like a playful song and a fun song. And I don't know, I was just thinking, maybe if they could find the kid in them again, maybe they'd find that some of these things that they're really angry about aren't that big of a deal. And that's
Mm.
kind of where, and so I had to start from a place of writing it from my perspective and for myself, which was, yeah, I could probably find the kid in me too again. And realizing that my imagination exists because I'm an image bearer of God, and God's given me the ability to imagine and dream, and especially specifically to imagine things inside the context of like deepened faith.
Sonically, yeah. Can you tell me what the rest of the? Because yeah, these two songs you've released, and particularly "Imagination," it's like as you said, very uh, bright and fun. And it's funny you mention it as a protest song because I think we tend to think of protest songs perhaps as more angry or
Mm-hmm.
visceral in a sense, but yeah, but this is, I guess, yeah, it's a protest against, as you say, that kind of way of thinking and negativity. But how have you approached the sonics of the rest of the record? What kind of, there's quite a lot of synths already in these new songs and
Right.
80s influences, which I really love.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, every song we just sort of approach differently, and that can be a really scary process because you start to listen to the demos and you just think, demo 1 sounds very different from demo 15, and because you always write a bunch of songs, and then we probably had 40 songs that we were picking through for this record, and so, it was really just, let's just pick the 11 songs that we think are the strongest. And we just sort of, rather than saying, all right, we have a synthesizer and we'll have a guitar and we'll have a drum, we just sort of took each song at a time and let each song sort of decide and dictate what they were going to have. And it just so happened that we wound up putting a lot of synths, which has been pretty true for our band, in there. But also, this was the first record that I didn't really play a whole lot of guitar on. Normally I play almost all the guitar. And so we have Connor and Dan in the band, and they held down a lot of that. So there was something new that they brought to it as well, different sounds that we hadn't had before. So I think a lot of it is just, we just wanted to make each song. In the past, I would say we've probably operated more from the mindset of, all right, we've got these ingredients to make this record, and this is all we're going to play with. Especially The Joy of Being, our last record, was definitely like that. This record was just like, all right, we've got all our ingredients, but then if we got to go over to our neighbor's house and borrow some ingredients, we'll do that too. If we need to
Mm.
go borrow that whatever weird synth or guitar or that one wild drum, whatever it is, like that's what we're going to do. And so that's sort of how we approached it, was more or less uh, kind of eliminating the rules and the boundaries.
Hmm. I love you guys are great mates with Kings Kaleidoscope,
Yeah.
who we love here also on Fresh, and I know you've both collaborated together with writing songs and stuff
Yeah.
together, and now of course you're in Nashville. So, um, I first of all, do you still work with Kings K, and also are there any other artists, Christian or mainstream, that just like a dream team of people you'd love to collaborate with, either producers or artists or anything like that?
Oh, good question. Well, yes, Chad and I of Kings, we're still writing together. I mean, they've been working on their new record for well over 2 years. So before I even moved, we were writing a lot together. And honestly, Chad and I have written so much together over the years now that we might do a FaceTime every now and then, but a lot of times it's just texting lyrics back and forth, and we kind of find our way that way. Just there's so many artists, but I mean, especially some that I really love writing with that I think are incredible. I think Chris Renzema is amazing. I think Chris Llewellyn of Rin Collective is another just incredible writer. Leslie Jordan, she was in All Sons and Daughters, who isn't technically a group anymore, but she's releasing music soon. She's a phenomenal writer. Um, Taylor Linhart and Jess Ray from this group called Mission House. I just love writing with them. And there's so many more. I just feel like that, to me, I feel like I'm always just blown away by the people that God brings into my path. And so hopefully get to keep doing that, and just all
Hmm.
those, I feel like for so many years, I don't know, a lot of us indie artists were, I mean, yeah, more indie artists, we weren't as connected to one another. And now things are changing, and the internet kind of brings us together in cool ways, which is sweet. So,
Hmm. And I love that, especially indie artists obviously would be the ones leading the way in this. You're not constrained by certain expectations of radio or labels necessarily. But you mentioned in the press release that you guys want to push the boundaries of what church music sounds like. Tell me more about that, because I'm all for that. I mean, church music obviously the worship has its place, but I think there's so much room for creativity within the Christian music space, indie or otherwise.
yeah, I guess and probably what I even mean by that, it's interesting because I feel like I'm constantly rethinking and and asking myself the question of like, what really matters, and sometimes I wonder if we have become, I was just a few weeks ago, to use an example, my family and I, Coldplay was in Atlanta, just a few hours away, so we went down to see them. It was my first time seeing them live, and there's 55,000 people there. And I've certainly been a fan of Coldplay, but I haven't followed all the records, earlier ones, then fell off the map and then kind of jumped back on. And I was just sitting there watching it, and I was just like, man, this is crazy. Like, I think that it's such a special, transcendent moment with all those people singing these songs, that I think where the church gets it wrong is we see those moments sometimes and we try to like capitalize on them. And we think, oh man, if we can just create those same moments on a Sunday. And I just don't think that's the point. I think the point of our gatherings is not to create a rock concert or to even create these big, expansive, sort of expectations that can become sort of burdensome and tiring. And I think we see the effects of that, because I don't know how it was in Australia, but when COVID lockdowns began, people were sort of like, now all of a sudden church was online, and then a lot of people have had a hard time coming back to the church, like on a Sunday. And I think a lot of that I think some of that was just the result of like, oh, yeah, we kind of do a lot of these things, but why? And I think that's the part for me that I hope that our music does, is sort of ask people the question of why. Like, why can't we do this song, or why should we do this song, or why can't we have all all this instrumentation, or why should we have all that instrumentation? And really, I just hope that our music, less than even the sound, I hope that our lyrics and just the melodies are like move people in a way that they could be in a church gathering on a Sunday or listening in their car or with a smaller group of people, whatever that looks like, that it would be something that inspires them and gives them a desire to want to perhaps look up and um, to want to worship a God that is bigger than we know.
Hmm. And Zach, one thing I also wanted to mention, one thing I've always loved about Citizens is your songwriting, obviously, but your ability to authentically write about life struggles. And one song which hit me a couple of years ago, great song sonically, but lyrically, very raw and honest, was "Good Is Gone," which explores the issues of mental health and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think sometimes songs like that are missing in the Christian space. Songs about traditionally called, I guess, Christian life songs. Just about your life, but I guess from a perspective of faith, which generally just comes naturally. But tackling those kind of issues head on in a song is not so natural, even from a pop perspective.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, how do you see, I guess, yourself as? I'm guessing you don't think too hard about it necessarily, but how do you view those kind of songs, like talking about life's other things outside of the Christian faith specifically?
I think when Citizens started, because we started as a band that met at a church, we we had this idea that we need to only make songs that the church can sing. And then honestly, my opinion started to change when I started to it's funny, like when you work at a church, you spend way less time with people that aren't, or you spend way less time with people that are not Christians than you do with people that are. And so I realized once I wasn't working in a church anymore, now I'm talking to my neighbors more and I have more space for all these different people around me that aren't Christians. I just started thinking more and more about how if I were when I'm talking about my faith and talking about Jesus, what language do I want to use, and what things are going on in their life that are also going on in mine, where I've found a lot of peace and a lot of hope along the way. And so honestly, for the past probably 8 years, I've really just wanted to write as much as possible about um, my journey through faith. And so a song like Good Is Gone is really, it's kind of about it's it's a song of really about my daughter, and just her own anxiety and trying to empathize with her and listening to her talk about it and understanding that this is a real issue in the church. This is a real issue in our world. And I just think that there's occasionally like the sermon series or something that comes up on a Sunday, and we're going to talk about mental health today. But there's just not a lot of music within the church that I feel like talks about that kind of stuff. And so I just probably more operate from a place of seeing the deficit and wanting to sort of provide a resource there. And that's what I think our music does. So a song like Good Is Gone, to me, does that. And a lot of songs from that period, but also like our record before that, Amir Dimly, and realizing that, oh, there's a deficit around conversations with people that are struggling, people that have doubts. And I think that because we haven't really embraced people that well that have questions and have their doubts, we inevitably push them away, and we sort of create this unnecessary tension. Like there already is the tension that they're dealing with of just trying to make sense of things that maybe can't even make sense of. Maybe there isn't an answer. But then we create this relational tension, which is like, that's not good. So I just think that I've always tried to write from my own experiences and as a Christian, and that I don't think will ever change.
Hmm. And Zach, a last question: what do you hope? You kind of touched on it there in a sense, but what do you hope people take away from your music, and specifically when they listen to New Citizens, this
Yeah.
EP and album?
Okay. So one of the visions I've had with this record is sometimes I'll sit at my table. We have this table on our deck, and I'll sit out there and I think about how every song on this record, there's 11 songs, and that each song represents a chair at this table. And that I don't really care that much about people falling in love with the record, although I hope they do. I hope more, though, that we can get them to connect to a song that would bring them to this table, and you'd have someone who is like really, really believing a lot of things that maybe seem to them true, but are actually causing them to become really angry or afraid. And then you have someone on the other side who is just from a different angle is believing things that aren't true, but is causing them to be afraid. Okay, each person a different song. They're at this table. And now you've got another person over here at the end of the table who just likes music. And then another person at the end of the table who is just recently became a widow. And you have all these different people sitting at this table. And I just hope that this record will feel like an invitation for each person to that table to talk, to be listened to. And, I think honestly, as a dad, I have 4 kids. I can, I can say all I want. Like, you guys, let's be kind and let's try and talk to each other rather than yelling at each other and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, it does require a moderator. It does require someone to sort of fight for the value of seeing each other as people that have a voice and people that have a place at this table. And I think that especially here in the States, I can't speak to other places, but I mean, even the church in general, it's not really growing because of conversion. If there's any growth, it's just because one person left a church and went to another church. And I think that if we were willing to have these tables where all kinds of different people could come to, we might find that we start to see people discovering and knowing Jesus. Because I think, if anything, my hope too is that this record would inspire people to testify and tell their story of what Jesus has done in their life. And so those are two of the biggest things. And I just feel like one of the most profound ways that we discover and learn more about God is through each other's stories. And I hope that this record just, I don't know, is licensed to people to want to share that and let people in to come to that table with their whole selves, but also be willing to receive other people around that table too.
I love that image, Zach. Zach Bolen from Citizens, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
And we can't wait to have you back in Australia and
yes.
Hopefully in 2023 sometime.
That is the hope. Hopefully a few months from now. It's been long overdue. We will have released 2 records in the time of, in that time of not being there. So we're hoping to make good on a promise and get back.